So first of all, he's been a professor most of his life, and he's been a professor in ethics and in environmentalism. He's written a textbook on environmental ethics that's now in its 3rd edition. He led, one of the most interesting things in the way we connected was that he led the sustainability committee. He started and led a sustainability committee in his retirement community in Claremont, California for 10 years. It was called Pilgrim Place, and he's going to talk about Pilgrim Place tonight a bit in the talk and what they did there. And that makes him a very good mentor for us here at Oaknoll. He has trained since came to Iowa City in 2020, left Claremont, California, which for those of you who know about it is an absolutely gorgeous place. But he came here because his son and daughter-in-law both took positions in the psychology department, and then they had a grandson, Max, 2 years ago. And so Robert and his wife Nancy moved to Iowa City to help with child care for Max while their son and daughter-in-law got acclimated to the psychology department and learned to teach all these new classes here, for those of us in here who remember about that. And so when he got to Iowa City, he signed up to do things with climate activism and sustainability with the city of Iowa City, and he went through a rigorous training program there under the leadership of Sarah Gardner and the Iowa climate ambassador. He completed the Iowa City Climate Ambassador training, and that allows him to go out and help with other groups or individuals or places like Oaknoll that want to improve their sustainability efforts on behalf of Iowa City. And when we called Sarah Gardner in to talk with us in the Sustainability Committee here in January, she said there's somebody who's interested in coming and helping with Oaknoll because he has this experience from when he lived in California. So we met Robert at the end of January, and he's been attending our meetings ever since, and he's been really helpful on 2 of the issues that we're working real hard on here right now that you may know about. Our composting, we're on the cusp of getting that started in the kitchen here and in the apartments where people desire to compost. And also you got a survey this week about electronic vehicles. The staff have been spending this month finding out what our capability is right now for electric vehicles and what it will take us to get to the next step. So about how many years do we have that we could accommodate people right now, and then when do we have to start building for more? And so he's able to advise us on these sorts of things too. So what he's going to talk to us about tonight are how climate change has and will continue to affect Iowa specifically, the excellent leadership that is available in Iowa City through their climate action and outreach staff, and also he's going to make some mention about how excellent the University of Iowa Sustainability Department is. A few of you may have been here when Stratus came and talked, although most of the people who were there are either sick or on vacation right now. But they were super impressed with what the University of Iowa has done, and they really have a knockout department. If you ever go out to the prairie out by the Mormon-Trek handcart area, just that is the most spectacular prairie I've seen in town. It's just amazing. And so they have they have the students tending it, and they have all the equipment that they need underground to know exactly how the prairie is doing and what needs to be done. And they're training their students to become interns and go out into the world and create those kinds of prairies elsewhere. And then finally, based on all of his experience, and especially his experiences at Pilgrim Place, he's going to make suggestions as to how we as individuals and as an organization can do better on sustainability. So I'm delighted to have Robert here, and thanks for coming to listen.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. And a quick but very genuine thank you to Sarah, not only for doing the work that she's doing here with other residents, but for co-editing this presentation with me. I'm recent to Iowa, now coming back. I'll add one little personal comment. But there is a Traer, Iowa, west of Vinton, and my grandparents, my father, grew up in Vinton, went to the University of Iowa, and while my grandparents were alive, I spent a couple weeks every summer visiting Vinton. So coming back to Iowa is a very interesting thing, relating back to my family heritage here in Iowa. So let's begin. We'll go straight through it. If you really don't understand something, you can stop me, but probably it's better if we go through and then have questions, if there are any, and comments after we do that. This is the iconic graph that tells us what's happened in the last 225 years with greenhouse gases. So if anybody questions you, well, the things are, we've always had carbon dioxide, we've always had these gases around, but never like this. Look at that increase, and it's still continuing. So these gases, carbon dioxide is the most prevalent in the atmosphere, and yet it also lives for thousands of years in the atmosphere, radiating heat back to the earth. Methane is about 20% of the total greenhouse gases, and it's 25 times more powerful in radiating heat back to the earth than carbon dioxide. It doesn't last as long, but has a higher effect. And the methane concentrations, unfortunately, have grown more than doubling in the last 2 centuries. So methane is very much a part of the fossil fuel economy that we've lived in for the last, our lifetimes and before. Since 1950, the United States has significantly reduced its carbon emissions by requiring catalytic converters on vehicles. That was a great step forward, by the way. Regulating emissions by power plants, and investing in renewable solar and wind power. During this period, China's rapid industrialization has increased its carbon emissions. Carbon emissions for the United States per capita are among the highest in the world, which isn't surprising. Whereas China's carbon emissions per capita are only half as high, which very few people know. Now a little bit Iowa information. Summer humidity in Iowa City has risen 6 degrees Fahrenheit since 1950. That's what that map shows in that darker red area for our part of the state of Iowa. Iowa has had heavier rainstorms over the past half-century. As carbon emissions will continue to increase, inevitably, even if we slow them, these rainstorms will also increase. Over the past 30 years in Iowa City, spring rainfall has increased by an average of 2.2 inches, which is enough water to fill both Coralville Lake and Lake McBride more than 13 times. Days over 90 degrees Fahrenheit going forward will increase. The greater our carbon emissions, the greater the increase in temperature. You can see the red line and the blue line. Depending on what we do, we'll be on the trajectory like one of those two lines. Days below freezing, that means more warmer days in the winter, will decrease as well, or will decrease depending on our carbon emissions. So more heat in the summer, some more warmer weather in the winter, but then we don't get the harder weather in the winter that also has ecological purposes. Iowa City has carbon emission goals, and these are reflected on this chart. We've almost reached in Iowa City its 2030 target for a 45% decrease in carbon emissions, which on this graph is where the lateral blue line would meet the horizontal sort of yellowish dotted line, right above the L of the word goal on the right side. That's the goal for 2030, but you can see that 2021 is just a little bit above that goal. And the real reason for that is the big drop in 2015. which isn't anything the residents did, but it's Mid-America's investment in wind power in a large way, which has brought down the use of fossil fuels in this city, and then it tracks, and then we've had a little bit up and down since then. Food choices are very important for trying to reduce carbon emissions. Not few people understand this, so we're going to talk more about it tonight. The city's climate goals, to make us aware of this, promotes local food purchases, expanding local community gardens, and encouraging a plant-rich diet. A March 8, 2023 article in the Cedar Rapids Gazette, which Sarah actually gave to me, warns that continuing the dietary patterns of today will push the planet past the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit of warning sought under the Paris Climate Agreement to avoid the worst effects of climate change, end of quote. A self-serving reason for eating less meat is that a plant-based diet will sustain the diverse gut bacteria we need to maintain a healthy immune system. Plant-based diets are good for the earth. Here's the data. Meat production leads to rampant forest destruction for grazing cattle or growing food for the cattle, drug-resistant bacteria, water pollution, methane air pollution. Plant-based diets are good for us for at least these three reasons. If we doubled our legumes in the diet, we would really equal the meat protein we're probably eating. Hardly anybody knows that. Eating less meat reduces the risk of heart disease and cancer. Plant-based diet carbon emissions are half of a meat-based diet. Now there's an asterisk there. That's the little box at the bottom. This statement that I just read, in the final draft of the IPCC March 2023 report, was the scientific conclusion, but it was taken out of the published report because of the meat lobby. So that tells us where we are.
You might just say what the IPCC is.
It's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Intergovernmental, there's a long word that I have to remember, there's an old person. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now here in Iowa, this chart, a little bit, well, you can see it pretty well. The top blue line is agriculture emissions, carbon emissions. And Iowa agricultural emissions are the second highest among all the states. Yet, the Iowa Department of Natural Resources has recently reported, it's quote, Iowa has no greenhouse gas reduction goals for agriculture or any other sector. Yet, Iowa agriculture, I'm here to tell you, is unsustainable. So we have a huge mismatch between the leadership on this issue in our state and the reality scientifically. As Iowa City is surrounded by farmland, to limit increasing heat in Iowa City, of course, requires limiting carbon emissions in the farmland. This all comes together. Warmer winters in Iowa affect agriculture. They've led to new and more pests. Humidity has eroded soils and is requiring more fertilizer for productivity. Night plant respiration, something we never think about, has reduced grain weight. Humidity is degrading stored grain. These again are facts. The quote from the 4th National Climate Assessment for the Midwest region, this was published in 2018 by the Trump administration. Projected changes in precipitation coupled with rising extreme temperatures before mid-century will reduce Midwest agricultural productivity to levels of the 1980s unless farmers switch to what we're now calling, most of the time, regenerative agriculture. And here's the book that I recommend to your community, just published by University of Iowa Press. You see all right? Am I in the way here? Fine. Okay. Written by Iowa farmers, Iowa educators, Iowans living in the rural areas. Iowans wrote this book, and it tells you must end what they call, bottom line here on the left side, what they call extractive agriculture. The word extractive was new to me to refer to agriculture, but actually what it means is you're just extracting the potential of the soil. You're not replenishing. You're not regenerating. It's like mining for food, but you're not replenishing. And all the fertilizers and all the pesticides and herbicides do not replenish the soil because they kill everything in it, besides the pests. So, 5 principles of soil health. It's in this book. Maintain continuous living cover, diversify plantings, include livestock, protect the soil, minimize soil disturbance. It's all about the soil being regenerated through the process of creating food from it. That's what we have to shift to, which we're not presently doing. Now, the Performance Food Group provides food for folks living here at Oaknoll. You may or may not know that, I don't know. But it is an exemplary sustainability corporation. And so I want to show you how that makes a difference. Here is their mission statement. We are committed to mitigating our environmental footprint through the efficient use of natural resources, the implementation of innovative technologies and solutions across Performance Food Group, and the advancement of sustainable practices throughout our supply chain. That last statement is crucially important. You have to reach back with your sustainability efforts to the supply chain. The major corporations have to require the supply chains to live up to these goals. These are the categories of the goals. We won't spend much time on them, but you'll see energy, renewable energy, energy efficiency, greenhouse gas emissions, resourcing, that refers to where things come from, wood, and also the food items. Diversity and inclusion, that has to do with who's doing the work, who's hired, who gets to rise in the corporation. Community engagement, there has to be an interface with the people who are the customers. And then waste management. I've only highlighted the waste management and given one goal, give you an example, achieve 80% diversion rate from the landfill for operating waste by 2030. That's a major goal. And it's very important when you look at the next slide, the report in 2021. Look at the numbers in the millions or hundreds of thousands for some of these categories of what was saved in 2021, because this corporation set goals and required all of those connected to it, users and providers within the system, to try to meet those goals and report on them. So you'll notice none of these numbers are rounded off. They're all reflecting the aggregate of data from a myriad of organizations that are involved with this program. This shows us that you can do something. A corporation can make a change. That's a huge change. And it wouldn't have happened if there wasn't pressure for it to happen. But also, the people who thought about it and worked with it know that it's cost effective in the long run. The investments going in are take money on the upside, but downstream, you gain from it every year. Everything you achieve that way. So, is Oaknoll buying local food? I don't know. We had a little bit of a conversation with it in the committee. We have in this area the field-to-family wholesale opportunity to buy locally grown food within 100 miles of Iowa City for communities like retirement homes, not just for individuals who come to the farmers market. So I suggest that Oaknoll should consider setting a local goal to buy some locally grown food. In my retirement community, not because of anything I did, but the head chef reported monthly to our food service company, we had a different company there, on its goals to increase local food use and to reduce food waste. Monthly reports. That's how you keep the chef awake to what might be done. It's not a punitive thing. You get awards, you get advancements if you help things get better. So that's just an example, and that was there when I got there. I didn't have anything to do with that. Now here we see the city saying composting food and yard waste needs to not be in the landfill. Where should it be? It should be in the compost process. So up on the right side you see that Iowa City has a compost site that serves the whole of Johnson County. It does not, however, have a pickup for businesses and, from its point of view, housing complexes as well as retirement communities are businesses, whether they're nonprofit or not. So you're out of that opportunity. It's individual at this point in time, individual pickups. Again, in my community in Claremont, we had pickups from the city for composting. And someday we'll have that here too. But Iowa City has to dig it as fast as it can. So look at the left border down there, that box. Now, Sarah already mentioned this. There is a sustainability committee that's working on food composting here at Oaknoll. But you need to know, and just keep it in mind, that now and for years in the past, all your food waste has gone to the landfill. And that, my friends, is not a good thing. Which is why the city is trying its best to take it out of the landfill, and why people here are going to work to help Oaknoll keep their food waste out of the landfill. It creates methane. It adds to the greenhouse gases, that very strong gas. You also don't have recycling from the city here. You have recycling from Johnson County refuse. And if you don't have a chart like this, in my opinion, you should. So you need to know what can go in and what can't. And it's online, and I just printed it off and made a slide of it, but anyone can get some. So I would urge you all, if you don't know what the system is, to know the system. One of the most important things in sustainability is to keep separate the three, what I'll just call with quotes, waste systems. One is trash, one is recycling, and one should be compost. There shouldn't be just two. But to keep those separate, you have to know what can and can't go in each one. And so that's an important step for your community to take on.
Just for the record, our recycling committee here at East is very good and has a lot of information for us. So
great. Well,
they also did some measurement a few months back to estimate how much we were diverting. So
that's great, if you heard that. So you are working on that issue, but this is really an individual issue too, because you're the one who puts things in the bin. So everybody has to know. I mean, we had to work hard at this in our community. I'm not criticizing anybody. It's just something new we have to think about. And, you know what that means. So here, the 3 R's of recycling, pretty common, but there's two important points to make here. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Those are the 3 R's. But in this order, I'm suggesting to you that you should always try to reduce first or reuse to solve whatever issue you have before you recycle. Why? Because recycling always leads to a less valuable degraded something, whatever you're recycling. Whereas if you reduce or reuse, you don't necessarily do that. And if you upcycle something, you're adding value to it. Now, how can that be? Well, I tell you, nature is the model. Nature recycles everything. It upcycles everything. Everything that's waste in nature isn't waste, it's reused. But I'll give you a high-tech example today. E-vehicles, regenerative brakes. Hear that word regenerative? First time I saw that, I thought, what's a regenerative brake? When you step on the brake, I have an e-vehicle. When you step on the brake in an electric car, the heat energy is transferred into electrical energy to recharge your battery. That's upcycling. It's taking a waste and putting it to work for a benefit. I mean, that's fantastic. When I first realized what I had in my car for brakes, I thought, this is wonderful. So anyway, upcycling, and this is a great book. If you don't know this book, it's well worth the read. It'd be good in your library. I was asked to say something about LEED buildings. Look at just the information here for a moment. In Iowa City, buildings create 80% of the carbon emissions. So buildings are really an important part of the solution to carbon emissions. LEED buildings are really just buildings that meet certifications for efficiency in all kinds of ways, in the walls, in the way that you dispose of things. We lived, my wife and I, for 10 years in a LEED building in our retirement community. Extremely energy efficient. We hardly even paid for air conditioning during the summer. It was that tight. So, this is a way where you can find standards, and if Oaknoll isn't aware of it or hasn't thought about using LEED, you can learn from LEED even if you don't go through the program, because it gives you all the ways of measuring what you can do. Leave the leaves to the pollinators. I loved it the first time I saw it. This was in an autumn article in Iowa's Climate City newsletter, which, by the way, is really valuable, and it doesn't cost anything. You can get it in your email. Instead of breaking the leaves to the street to be picked up, which we all see happening in the fall, why not put them around your shrubs, trees, along the fences? Moths and butterflies don't all migrate, and those that stay need places to lay their eggs and leaf litter. Leaf litter sustains diverse life in the soil, all kinds of life in the soil going on all winter. Leaves suppress weeds and retain moisture, and leaves allow you, if not to stop using fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, at least to cut back. Now, I know you don't break your own lawns and control that, but there's no reason why Oaknoll couldn't build into its process of dealing with its landscapes some leaf litter areas for the sake of the natural world around us, so we're not only exterminating everything when we live someplace. Replace lawn with native grass. We've got some here already. Why is Iowa doing this? Actually, I didn't know this until I moved to Iowa and began to read about it. It not only supports plant and animal biodiversity, you get filtered rainwater and it helps to hold it underground. Store more carbon in their roots than trees. Yes, once the plants are mature, down to 20 feet. That's fascinating, amazing. And it's so much easier to, in some areas, to put in some native grasses than to put in a tree. People say plant an oak, where we don't have enough room in our yard for the oak, but we have enough room for some native grasses. Iowa City has a climate transportation set of goals. Increase the use of public transit, encourage electric vehicles, alternative fuel vehicles, increase bicycle and pedestrian transportation, increase compact and contiguous development, that's beyond all of us, increase employee commuter options, but you can see why. Any way we can shorten the commuting and the trafficking that has to go on the streets, we save on fossil fuels. That's an electric bus, and now the city now has 4, and we're buying more. And we're all over 65, I think, in the room. So we're free on this system. And there's a lot of buses out there, and they go almost everywhere. So wait, at least in the fair weather, that might be a way to get around. I was asked to say something about electric vehicles, very little, because there's not a lot of hard facts here. But I will tell you, from my own personal experience, an ordinary electric outlet, a 110 outlet, just like this, is satisfactory for charging a vehicle at about 4 miles per hour being plugged in. If you put it in overnight for 8 hours, well, that's 4 times 8, 32 miles. So, in other words, you can get a significant charge just if you're just driving locally. You just come home, plug in, and you can get yourself charged up. If you go down to the parking garages in the city, there are charging stations in several of them. A couple of them anyway that have first hour free, because that's where I go, and you get about 20 hours at that level 2 charging station, and it's almost always open when I go. So I use that when I need a larger charge in a short time. Taxes and rebates, unclear now. There's a website up there, but the critical issue for that is the VIN of a car. If you are thinking about buying a used or a new car, you really have to check the VIN directly to know anything about tax credits or rebates for that vehicle. It's that complicated, unfortunately. But it's true that there are some vehicles available now with a 200-mile range or so that are not as costly as they used to be. And so I have one of those not as costly as they used to be vehicles. 2017 Chevy Bolt, and with 40,000 miles on it. It runs perfectly. So that's something about electric vehicles. This is very interesting. Iowa City is one of the first cities in the country to use a consumption-based emissions inventory. Long phrase. What does it mean? Give you an example. The consumption emissions of a building, for example, include the carbon emissions from producing and transporting all the materials required for construction and all the emissions involved in removing construction waste, as well as the operating costs. You see immediately how that's a much broader assessment of a building's energy use and fossil fuel emissions. So the chart, this chart, that's what it's telling you, but it doesn't tell you, it means that a lot more are due to consumables and a lot more due to food. There's a lot of that's being trucked in here all the time. But this chart doesn't tell you how we're consuming in terms of the capacity of the earth to support us, which is sort of the bottom line of all bottom lines. And I can tell you that if everyone on the planet lived the way we are in Iowa City, on average, we would need 4 Earths to support the human population. So we are on the upside of consuming. It doesn't seem like it, but I mean, compared on a world basis, we have work to do if we care about what's happening. We can affect climate change much more than poorer people in other countries. We have the options to do that. About 2% of our community-wide emissions are produced by the operations of the city landfill and recycling center, which accepts waste from all of Johnson County and the city's wastewater treatment plant. If you look at this chart, the big orange section has to do with food and yard waste, organic waste. That has to be reduced going forward. And the gray area is much less easily defined, but it's defined in the chart as waste at the source, which means the waste should never be getting to the landfill. It should be being taken care of at the source, either by being taken away and reused in some way, if that's possible. A lot of construction materials can be reused in ways. Think about wood waste. The University of Iowa is burning wood to heat the buildings. I mean, we need systems that deal with waste at source, not just at the landfill. So that's the challenge going forward, or otherwise we're going to be going up with the landfill, and going up means we're going up with methane emissions as well. University of Iowa, 3 slides. Won't say too much except to say, glory be, you have an amazing university system here. I heard a presentation to the 100 Grannies, not being 100 Granny, but I heard it on a Zoom program. It was wonderful. So, just to identify, these are not very specific except for the first 2. Reduce greenhouse gases by 50%. That's specific. That's big. 100% of undergraduate students complete a sustainability course. That's a requirement beginning this year. But that's amazing. I don't know any other university like that. That's a real commitment, and we should be very grateful to have this kind of organization right here with such a huge impact on our city. The university has a very practical way of explaining why it's doing what it's doing, because it reminds us that sustainable goals must meet economic needs and fulfill social expectations as well as address environmental issues. That's the game. That's the whole bit. You have to plan that way, otherwise somebody will prevent you from doing what needs to be done. And here, the bottom line, carbon emission goals, 50% reduction by 2030 in CO2 emissions, the whole campus. Coal-free by 2025. They only have one furnace left burning coal. And, be off it sooner rather than later. They use biomass in a whole variety of ways. It's very creative, inspiring, really. Now, Sarah asked me just to use 3 slides, or a few slides, about the community that I was in, just to reinforce that, people that don't know so much and can just get together in a community and organize and get these things to happen. So, when I first arrived at my retirement community in 2010, I asked the CEO if I could review the water use records. Yes, he said, and pointed to the drawer where the bills for 200 plus accounts were kept in rubber bands. So I did for several years. Entered the data from the bills into a spreadsheet. Because if you don't see where we are and keep track of where we are, you don't know what to do. So, look at how much water was being used way back in 2001. Well, how much could we reduce that over time once we started paying attention? As long as it was cheap, I don't want to criticize the CEO, but as long as it was cheap, which it was, it's not a high priority. Unless you see it and begin to look forward, because water is no longer cheap in California. So dual flush toilets, fantastic change, almost overnight. And then the California drought enforced water restrictions to the extent that we had to let long die on our own campus, not all of it, but some of it, because it was mandated. We also kept track as a sustainability committee of the monthly water use, and nobody knew really what was happening month by month. You see this fantastic pattern here. It's so clear that in the winter when the sprinklers are off, we're using a whole lot less water, in fact, less than 50%. So that meant irrigation was more than half our water use, irrigating lawns. And when you think about water scarcity and you're spending all this water on lawns. So that had to change, has to change. And we began to change it, and people living there now are still working with that. Electrical use. The red bars here refer to our healthcare center, our nursing home. As you may know, those are very, very high energy water using facilities, higher than your residential facilities. You can see by the chart, we were unable to reduce the electrical use of that building, which was 60% of all of the major building use. But we did bring down the other buildings by paying attention and finding ways to cut electrical use. And once you begin to look at it, knowing when to run in some of these facilities, the washing machines at night when the electricity is cheaper rather than in the middle of the day, this kind of thing. You look for things, solutions. There are options, there are choices. And then you keep track and you see the results, and then you know you're saving money. And then you can verify why we should be doing this. And we save cost, that shows right there. We did install solar just before Nancy and I left, and more solar has been installed, and that has brought the electrical cost way down. So, 2 slides in summary. Oaknoll's choices that would matter. We always say, do any of these things matter? Well, look what the university's doing. That matters. Look what we could do. Or you could do. And I'd be happy to help if I can. Set sustainability goals, measure results, report. There's just no way out of that process if you're serious. Because that's how you know what you're doing. Compost food waste and yard waste. Keep organic materials of any kind out of the landfill. Consult with PFG, your food service company, about buying local food. I'll be surprised if they don't have that as a goal. I just don't think you've had communication with them about it. Our provider had that as a goal, which is why we kept the records. Provide more food-based food, more plant-based food choices. It's not a matter of banning meat from the dining rooms. It's a matter of providing more and attractive and the kind of plant-based food that people want to eat, and not just there's no meat, so eat it. That can be done. We did that in our community and the amount of meeting just went down voluntarily, and the amount of plant-based meals that were eaten went up. And once that happens, the kitchen's just as happy as anybody. There's no opposition if the residents verify what they want. Leave some leaf litter for pollinators, replace more lawn with prairie grasses. All of those are choices that this community could have. And then, all together, enjoy the challenges and the rewards of living more sustainably. This isn't just a slog through mud. This is something that is creative, is challenging, it's interesting, and it makes sense to people when you get into it. And it works. Saves energy, saves money. Individual choices also. Each of us can compost in our own units now. It's the project that Sarah and the sustainability team are working on. Recyclable, recycle responsibly. I suggested what that might mean. Eat a plant-based diet. Invest in renewable energy if you have a chance. If you have a car here, you can't do it in your furnaces and things, but maybe you need a 10-year plan now at Oaknoll for how you are going to get out of the natural gas equipment you probably already have for your heating everything. You have to think about that because it'll only get more expensive at the end if you don't get on the front end of that shift. Support regenerative agriculture. None of us are in agriculture here, but actually we have to support state and leadership on this issue or nothing will happen. So that's something we could do. And then I put a little quote in there in green. This is just my personal statement. Choose to live and die with hope and with joy. Why not? And your choices will matter to you and to all who know you. I won't say amen, but I did. So, I'm happy to try to respond to questions or any comments. Anybody wants to add anything? Sarah, if you have anything you want to add?
Well, I will add one thing that, Steve Rose said, kind of informally at one point, maybe it probably wasn't all that formally. I think it might have been at a residence council meeting last month. But I didn't know this when I asked him who is going to be the architect for if they get to build a new building here. He gave the name. And I said, do they know anything about LEED buildings? And somebody said, oh, all the architects know about building LEED buildings now. But anyway, what Steve Rose said, and I got really excited about this. I didn't know this at all. I did know that the spring building at the other campus, the newest part of it, I knew that it had geothermal, for example. He said that when they built that building, they did build it to the level of LEED specification, but they didn't pay the $50,000 or plus or whatever to certify that it was LEED. So that was really encouraging because I know there are a lot of people who didn't really think that he was maybe that interested in sustainability, but that was a pretty big statement that already 8 years ago, 9 years ago, they were doing that over in spring. So, and he does seem to be very interested in how we can get that same kind of level. It's going up now for LEED for the new buildings. So,
Sarah,
I've been meeting with somebody from the 100 Grammys about how they did that on the Unitarian Universalist Church, and so I have a list of things now that I can go to.
what about this building, these buildings?
That's a lot harder because they're built. The best time to do this is when you're building.
But why do they do it at Spring Street and then just slide back into what we've got?
You might know a little bit more about it.
The reason is that they took over the building that another owner had designed, and so they were not able to make the changes that they could have. I asked Steve Rowe about that, whether they were going to make it like Spring Street, and he said, well, we really can't because everything is already specified, and we have to go along with that. So, and
It should be.
It's blinking, but I don't know the mic, so it doesn't look to me like it's on. Hello? I can just use the speaker mic.
Okay. Try it. I was just saying that they took over the construction of this building from somebody who had already designed, and they were at the contractor stage, I think. It was very far along. And they had not made any plans at that point to make it more sustainable, and it was not possible to change. There are a couple things that were done and are being done. That's, we have prairie areas out here, and
That's great.
we're in the first year again of redesigning that. We also have, at the moment, we have 3 electric cars, but we have a number of hybrid cars. And we have chargers in building 3 for 2 cars, and then some electrical outlets close to the other electric car, which is over in this building. And I know that a number of people have plans to purchase electric cars maybe in the near future.
Right. Okay. I'll add one more comment about solar. I was told that often you have buildings where the roofs are not adequate to add solar because they weren't constructed to bear the weight of the solar systems. But in our community, we put in solar above the parking lots. It also served the purpose of shading the parking lots. But I mean, the structures to build them in the parking lots don't reduce parking, and once they're up there, also the trees are less likely to be blocking out the sun over a parking lot, like the parking lot over here. So the solar option, it doesn't have to be on a roof. And you may at some point think, well, we could maybe do that. It's really cut electricity costs for my community in California significantly, although the investment, was substantial. Anyone else want to comment? I'm sorry, but I'll give a mic to anybody who wants to make a comment or ask a question, because otherwise I won't hear you.
So in California,
Yes.
you have a lot more sun than Iowa.
Sorry?
In California, you have a lot more sunlight.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
It makes it so you could save a lot of money on it.
Well, that's true. That's a calculation you have to make. Here, we're very fortunate that to have Mid-America and wind-generated power here in Iowa. I mean, that is a tremendous asset to us. And we have to pay for it on the front end in terms of rates, but I mean, long-term, that's very important. So it's not necessary in many places, but we may find in the long term that might make sense. Also, it's going to get warmer, so we may have more sun long term.
Somebody on the gardening committee was asking me today if we start composting, whether we get that composting back. And I think the answer is probably no to that. I think it goes to the composting pile right now.
Yes, well, any system that I know, the city's composting system doesn't come back, except that when it goes to the process and becomes compost, there are times and places where you can get free compost from piles in the city.
That was my question.
But it doesn't come back to where it came from. There'd be no possible way to keep track of that in terms of volume.
Isn't there some place at the dump or something that we can go to get?
I think it's the
Yeah.
East Side Recycle place.
Yes.
Well, yeah, there are places, like I said, the city uses various places when it has compost to share. Not,
It has a lot.
and there's a lot of that available, that's true. And I've been told that it's good quality compost.
It's good quality and it's free.
Yeah.
All you have to do is go get it.
Yeah. So this, again, the city is an asset to us here. They're well organized. They only have so much money. So, it takes time to do all these things, but they really understand what needs to be done. And again, the university is a great asset. They're going to be planting vegetables in various small gardens within the university this year. You should go walking in the campus downtown and look to see, besides the flowers, which are fantastic, in the university landscapes, you're going to find some tomatoes or other kinds of things growing there, just to make it a living place, a place where plants of all kinds grow, and we feel like this is Iowa. This is a place where we should have life wherever we can have it, not just grass. I mean, grass is life, but you know what I'm saying. Most places we don't get a benefit of grass except to keep the soil down, so it doesn't become bowling around. Grass is great for sports. Grass is really good for keeping the weeds down overall, but I mean, it doesn't put back into the soil. It takes out. It's extracted. Grass is extracted. And it draws fertilizers and pesticides from those who want to use it. So that's a whole other side of it. It's a chemical landscape. Anyway, I shouldn't go on. And I'm happy to stop anytime. I'm done with my presentation. But is there any other comment anyone wants to make?
Well, I'd love more questions too, but I did have one more comment. Was a couple of years ago, we had, was it the dietitian? Oh, we had the dietitian or the people, Bruce Titus and others, come in here to talk about, you know, could we get more, well, could we get more vegetarian here? And we do have more vegetarian here than we did 2 years ago, et cetera. And there was a question about local food. There was also questions about organic. Now, on organic, the answer was too expensive. On local foods, the answer was it's too unreliable. It's too much work, you know, to try to do that. You can't put that on Bruce Titus and the chefs to be going out. But an interesting possible idea here from your talk is to deal with the food provider and get them in contact with Michelle Kenyon to see whether they can get some local food on a more kind of reliable basis so that it's usable here. So that's one thing we can pursue, I think.
Yeah, I think somebody should communicate with this very large corporation that is trying to keep track of sustainability goals related to its business, because you're a part of that. And if you're not actually participating somehow in that whole process, why not? They want it. Why can't it happen here? I don't know. So I would suggest that's a good follow-up. Well, you've been very kind to come visit me this evening.